Hello, welcome to the Bible Standard. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and drop a comment in the comment section and we'll do our best to get back to you.
When we think about the topic of God, we have some choices that we need to make. You can refuse to think about it, which we call willing ignorance. Say, I don't want to know, don't want to think about it. You can deny that God exists, which of course then makes you into what we call an atheist, because you don't believe in God. Atheism means no God, and you end up having to believe in evolution. You can remain undecided. The agnostic says, well, it might be this, it might be that, but why do I care? And they make no further progress. Some people just say, I just need to be a good person. I'm spiritual. I try and do good things, and that's all that really matters. Or you can believe in God and take it no further. There are people who say, look, yes, I know there's a God, I believe in God, but I don't want him in my life. And that's called deism, actually having God there but not doing anything about it. You can also believe in God and willingly say, I'm going to defy God and enjoy my life. Or you can do what we should do, which is believe that God is, and we trust and obey his word. And if we believe that God does exist, and we hope that by the end of tonight that you will also come to that conclusion that God does exist, then we must have a reason for us to be here upon the earth. And the Bible claims to be the Maker's instructions, and we need to believe God's word. Now, there are 4 avenues we could take to prove to you that there is a God. And when I say prove to you, it would be giving you a tremendous amount of circumstantial evidence for the fact that there is a God, a creator. And these are the 4 things we could take. The facts about the universe, the amazing planet, the beauty of the things that have been made and the intricacy of those things. We could look at the Bible itself, how accurately brilliant the Bible is internally, how it quotes itself and how it supports itself. We could take the powerful witness of fulfilled Bible prophecy and look at the ancient empires, how God decreed their fates and how they came to pass with precision. And we could look at the resurrection of the Lord Jesus Christ and actually show you that there's every reason to believe that Christ was raised from the dead, which of course was a miracle, and a miracle requires a God. But we're going to take number 1 tonight and look at the creation. And I believe that's the greatest reason for us to believe in God as a creator. It's a brilliant and wise creation that we have around us, and God made all these things. So I want you to look at this goat. You see the goat there? You all see the goat? Right, excellent. But is it a goat or is it a bird? So what do you think now? Well, it's actually a kookaburra. But you see, the first time when you looked at the goat, you actually found the goat. Because looking at the same thing with whatever you have in your mind determines how you would look at that and how you will accept it. And it's like that with creation. You can look at it and say, well, I look at that and I can believe that evolved. I can believe in blind chance. For no purpose, this all happened. Or I can look at it and say, a brilliant God made it. So we're going to look at some of the evidence for God from the creation. And this one I put up, and in deference to people like Brother Dave, who know far more about that than I do about cells and so forth. But here's a microscopic view of the working of a human cell, something you can't even see without a microscope. And look at all the little parts inside of that have all got a particular function to perform in relation to each other. It's even more complicated than most chips that we have in our computers. But there's just inside one human cell. And most scientific opinion looks at that and says, there's incredible design, there's colour, there's the interaction of all those parts to make a cell work and do what it should do, but it just happened by pure chance to come into being. And that's like looking at the goat or the bird. If you want to look at that and say, well, to me it's a goat, when it's actually a bird, you can see, can't you, how people can take the same thing and come to the wrong conclusions about it. So in Job 38, we have the beginning of God challenging Job and his friends. And from chapter 38 to 41, there are 84 questions posed by the Creator to the deficient understandings of mortal men. And Job and his friends have been debating all about God for chapter after chapter through this book. And we come to this point where God intervenes. And it's called the rhetorical teaching style. God doesn't answer any of the questions. He just puts the questions out there and says, look at the evidence for yourself. And all of these things that God raises have been conundrums for mankind for centuries. Some of them we're now getting to unfold because of our scientific ability. But these things have been there. And this book is over 3,400, 3,500 years old. And God talked about these things and said, can you explain them? And Job and his friends had no explanation for them. We're getting some understanding of some of these things now, but not all of them. And some of them we still don't understand. So we're going to look at the Earth's evidence, which is, we said, is the greatest reason to believe in the wise Creator. Now, God said this about our planet. He said, look, He formed the Earth and He made it. He's established it. He created it not in vain. It's not here without purpose. He formed it to be inhabited. So God wanted a planet upon which people, human beings, mortal people and animals could live, and to live and have sustenance from that creation. So what did God do? Well, God created a special place in the universe, a special planet in the universe amongst all the millions of stars. And our planet has at least 122 factors that make life on Earth a possibility. Any one of those, varied by less than 1 or 2%, would make life disappear very quickly. So the Earth is actually floating in space, precisely placed in relation to other planets, and with so many forces inside the Earth and around the Earth that make life a possibility. Just for example, take our plants. Every day, plants convert sunlight and energy 6 times the power consumption of the world today. It's amazing, isn't it? That's done by plants, and that creates energy. Of course, people eat the plants and they get the energy carries on through the chain of human and animal life. So the Earth was created for life, and it was made perfect that it might sustain that life. Here's some more facts about the Earth. It's the right distance from the sun. If we were closer, we would burn. If we were further away, we would freeze. It's the correct size, has the vital circular orbit that takes it through around the sun, being sometimes further away from the sun than others, and so we get our seasons. The Earth rotates at exactly the correct speed for life to exist and to prosper. It has a molten magnetic core that is vital to what happens on the surface. It has oxygen, hydrogen and water, which are not found on any other planet that we know about. And we've got them here in the perfect balanced combination. It has a unique ozone layer. And of course, we know what happened back in the 60s and 70s. We had ozone in our fridges and we were using it in spray cans. And we created holes in the ozone layer. You know, the ozone layer is incredibly small. It's just a thin layer that's up there. And of course, the gases all being different weights, it was up there above us and it protected us from the harmful rays of the sun. And we began to create holes in it by using the things that were in our refrigerators. Of course, we've stopped doing that now. And what do you know? The ozone layer has largely repaired itself, because that's what nature does. It repairs itself. But we need it because we would be killed by the sun's harmful rays without that ozone layer. The moon is large. It's exactly located to cause the essential tidal movements on Earth. Interesting fact about the moon, if you actually had the moon and you dropped it on top of Australia, Australia is wider than the moon is wider, than the width of the moon. So it's not a huge planet, but it's out there perfectly related to us by gravity, and it brings the tidal movements of the Earth that actually cleanse the waters and also support so much marine life. The tilted axis brings us the seasons in turn. So the axis is just at 13 degrees off the norm, and we can actually therefore get seasons as we go around in our circle around the sun. And the gravity of Jupiter protects the Earth from random comet strikes. So comets coming through space aiming to us, the gravity of Jupiter pulls them away from us. And again, perfectly placed so that life can exist on the Earth. You see, God said, I created it to be inhabited. Let's just take a few aspects in particular. We'll take water as our first specific topic, which is mentioned right through Job 36 to 38. Miraculous water. Here's some things about water that we need to know. It's the unique life-giving factor on this planet. Evolution has no way to explain how water came to be in such quantities, and the fact that it is such a useful element to have for life. It can exist in three forms. It can be solid like ice, a liquid, as we have it mostly in our taps, and it can be as a gas, which is steam. And of course, you know that it has different uses in all of those. The ice keeps our coolers cold. The liquid, of course, we need for our water in our houses. And of course, we need steam. So we used to drive trains and we drive engines with steam. Water is transparent. Light can go through water. Many liquids, light can't penetrate it. But it can go down 60 metres, which is why fish and coral reefs and sea plants flourish where they can actually get that light coming through from the surface. And here's something I didn't realise until recently. Water dissolves other substances faster than any other liquid upon the earth, even faster than acid. Water is incredibly penetrating into substances. And so water is an amazing thing to have. Your body is 65% water at least. They say females slightly more, but generally we're about 65% water. It has a capillary action. So you get a narrow tube and water will actually climb up that tube, which is why trees flourish, because the trees have all these little tubes going up through their structure, and the water from the roots is taken up and it gets right up to the leaves by capillary action. And again, water is one of the very few liquids that does that because it has a surface tension. And then it expands as it gets colder and then floats on the surface. And that is a feature most unusual amongst substances. Many things, you freeze them, then they might go solid, but they don't float. Water floats. Let's look at that one. Water and the freezing point. Water expands as it gets colder. So the colder you make water, the more it will expand. It's called by a thing called hydrogen bonding. It actually makes it larger than it was when it was not solid. So at 4 degrees centigrade, so you've got a stream or a pond, and at 4 degrees centigrade, the water that is at that temperature sinks to the bottom. And then the surface gets hit by wind chill, and it now becomes chilled below 4 degrees centigrade. And once the top layer is lower than the 4 degrees at the bottom, the top freezes into ice because it's the less dense, it's larger and lighter, because it's now expanded, and so it floats. But that means that the water below is now protected from the wind chill, and the water below stays at temperatures that allows plants and fish and marine life to continue. That's why the ice floats on top, but then underneath you've still got your life going on at the bottom of the stream. What a remarkable thing for water to have this freezing point at 4 degrees centigrade. And actually to have that system whereby you can actually still have life in that stream or pond or lake. Well, it's there in Job 38. Look what it says in verse 30. The waters are hid as with a stone. So God hides the waters underneath as with a stone, and the face of the deep is frozen. So the surface is frozen. And that's a unique thing to preserve life in the waterways. And God says, have you got that? Well, what an incredible thing water is. You know, ice or frozen water is less dense and so less heavy than unfrozen water. So icebergs float, even though you only see a small part of it. They say probably with most icebergs, you're seeing about 1/6 above the water and 5/6 below. And that, of course, is a great danger to shipping. These floating mountains of ice can cause trouble, as you ask those people in the Titanic would know all about that. So here is an amazing floating thing. The ice actually floats on the surface. Now, there's a water cycle, and we won't go back through it, but sometime you've got a couple of minutes. Go through Job 36 to 38 and colour in all the references to water and weather. And you will actually trace through Job 36 and 37 particularly that there is a tremendous water cycle that God has set in place in our earth. It talks in, these are straight quotations, the covering of the seafloor, small drops of water being drawn up, so evaporation, trickling rain and mist, clouds that deliver pouring rain for man, so you get those heavy seasons of rain. You get the bursting up of clouds. If you've ever been in Brisbane on 4 o'clock on a summer afternoon, you see the great clouds start to go up, and then, of course, down comes the thunder and lightning and the rain. So the mounting up of the clouds, the mighty thunderings in the heavens, the spreading of the lightning, snow, light rain and heavy rain, which, of course, is the monsoons we get in Asia, winds, whirlwinds, blizzards and cyclones. And all of those things are used in Job 36 and 37 to show that God is in control of the elements. An amazing mechanism to support life. And God's put in place that water will be there. Water will go up, will come down, and it will support life upon the earth. And so God says this, hast thou entered into the treasures of the snow? Hast thou seen the treasures of the hail? And up until we had microscopes, we had no idea what God was talking about. And people read their Bibles for centuries, not knowing what God was talking about. But we know, don't we? We know what you do when you put a microscope over snow. And these are some of the things, the photographs of the snowflake under the microscope. And notice all of them are based upon six-sided dimensional figures. And they are incredibly beautiful, the treasures of the snow. Isn't that amazing? The treasure of the snow. And God said, I've put that there, and one day you'll understand it. Our generation is the generation that can understand that God knew what he was talking about 3,000 years ago. But the next verse goes on about the snow. He says this in verse 22, verse 23, which I have reserved against a time of trouble and against the day of battle and of war. So part of God's armoury, and this is the Net Bible, have you entered the storehouse of the snow or seen the armoury of the hail, which I reserve for the time of trouble, for the day of war and battle. And there are two significant events in history which affected the Bible. One was Napoleon going outside of Catholic Europe to take on Russia. And God stopped him. God had given him success after success in trampling down the Catholic system. But the minute he went to go and attack Russia, God stopped him with a terrible winter. And it was the same with Hitler. The Battle of Stalingrad was lost because of the snow that came down and destroyed Hitler's Third Army. So, God can use that when he wants to use it. And we know that, of course, when you read Ezekiel 38, that when the time of the end comes and God destroys the Russian host in Israel, we know that, again, he will use hail in the day of battle. Now, there are reliable star movements, and I won't go into this in any great depth, but God says this in verse 31 to 33, can you tie the bands of Pleiades or release the cords of Orion? And he talks about Mazzaroth and other stars as well. And what this is talking about is there are certain stars out there that actually are quite distant from each other, but when you look at them from the earth, they appear to be a group of stars. But they always move in unison, some very loosely, others very tightly. So no matter where you are upon the earth, you look at these stars and you see them actually relating to each other. And God says there's two things. There's the sweet influences of Pleiades. So here is this group of stars that move fairly randomly, but always can be seen to be related to each other. The other ones are bands, and they are very tightly bound to each other. We won't go into the detail of all that, but God said, do you understand that, Job? Now, we can have a much greater understanding because we can actually see these stars much better than they could. But even up until the last century, people navigated by the stars because they were utterly predictable. You knew what they would be at any certain time. And God said that these are predictable things. They will always hang together in their right place. Now, one thing about evolution and creation, which is so obvious, is that if you believe in evolution, it would create only functional things. The survival of the fittest would be the ones that would survive. And yet we find in creation there is incredible beauty that God has created. And he does it with colour. And he uses that colour to attract birds and insects that those plants might propagate. And God says this, consider the lilies, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin. Yet I tell you, even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. You take your best garment and put it under a microscope, and the stronger the microscope, the more flaws you will see in the garment. You take a flower and put it under a microscope, the more you expand that vision, the more perfection you will see, because God made it. And so God says, consider the lilies. Great reason to us to believe in a creator. And then we come to the beauty of created things. And this is just a picture of the glass-winged butterfly. Colours a man cannot replicate. A butterfly that is transparent in his wings. And on the right-hand side, you have the head of a hummingbird. And again, the thing about the hummingbird's colours is they are not pigment like we normally know colour. They are the structure of the feathers that actually cause colour totally different to anything else that we know in our colour schemes. And we'll come back to the hummingbird a bit later on. But God challenges us. Look at verse 36 of Job 38. Who hath put wisdom in the inward parts? Who hath given understanding to the beast, to the heart? So, who has put wisdom in the heart of animals? Well, you think about animals and the things they have that we can barely understand. They have inborn instincts. We breed a few puppies at our place, and one thing I'm absolutely astounded is the instinct both of the mother and the puppies toward each other. The puppies are blind when they're born, and they instinctively know what to do. They huddle together for warmth, they know where to look for milk, and they just got all the instincts born into them, as with the mothers. But think of the instincts that animals have, that they use in hunting, they use in breeding. Incredible things. Think how some animals work with other plants and creatures. You ever seen the little clownfish on the Great Barrier Reef that actually swims around in the poisonous anemone, attracting fish into the anemone? And when the fish comes to try and attack the clownfish, they're stung by the anemone. The anemone then begins to eat the fish that's been killed and then spits out some for the other little fish that's floating around as the bait. And it's amazing when you see plants and animals working together. Amazing camouflage. In animals have this ability to hide and to change colour. You watch an octopus or a squid change colour when they're under attack, or when they go to another place on the reef and they actually then change colour immediately to match up to that place. Migratory knowledge. We have birds and fish that migrate. How does this little salmon who goes down the river when he's only so long, how does he know where to come back to that exact headwaters where he was born? Did his mother tell him? How is that implanted to know which river to go up? But he knows, and he goes back to that place to create the next generation. Homing instincts. You know, people send pigeons up to Darwin, release them. The pigeon does a couple of loops and then says, oh, my place I've got to go to is down there in Adelaide, and away they go. And they've got that worked out. How do they do that? But they have those homing instincts. The sense of smell and hearing. The animals can smell and hear far more than we can. They say dogs are actually 40 times more using their scent than we are. So that's why we have dogs to detect drugs and dogs to chase down people and find lost people and so forth, because they have those senses of smell. The foreknowledge of the weather. Ever notice the ants in your backyard starting to build little cones when they know that the rain's coming? How do they know that? And many other animals are aware of the weather that's going to change, and so they make provision for it. And then we have radiolocation. It took up to the Second World War for mankind to invent radar. That is, you send out radio signals and then when they bounce back, you know there's something there. The animals were doing that since God created them. You've got bats. You've got birds like owls. You can actually know where their prey is at night. And the bats, of course, they can actually pick out insects hundreds of metres away and home in on them. And it's all done by having the radar or the radiolocation built into them. Who hath put wisdom in the inward parts? That's what God's challenge is, isn't it? Well, let's come to my favourite little creature, the hummingbird. Something that is fearfully and wonderfully made. And I want you to think about people who believe in evolution and look at this hummingbird and see how you think this could evolve. Now, the perfect helicopter. But we say that because they can go forwards, backwards, up, down, and they can even fly upside down. So they are the perfect helicopter. Most helicopters we know about can't fly upside down, but this one can. Their wings beat at least 70 times a second. Some go up to 200 times a second. You think that's rather incredible. Just try and move your finger 3 times a second. You know, you're going to struggle to get 3 times a second. They can move their wings at least 70 times a second. And that's a full wing beat. 70 in 1 second. They can hover motionless, stay in the one place. No other bird can do that. With their long beak, they delve in and get the pollen, they get the nectar out of the plant. And of course, they get pollen on their heads and their beak, and they go to the next plant and they're actually putting pollen to other blossoms. All part of the way that plants and animals work together. They move mites to other blossoms, which of course are part of the cycle. How could that evolve? Can you see a lizard sitting there thinking, I'd like to be a hummingbird. I'd like to have wings that beat at 200 times a second. So I'll start flapping my front legs and see if it evolves. I mean, it's just ridiculous, isn't it, that you can think of that being just happening. Some hummingbirds weigh only 3 grams. Now, most of the audience here knows what a pound of butter is. But to get a pound of butter and weigh it with hummingbirds, you need 150 hummingbirds on the other side of the scales. That's how small they are. And if you've been to America, you've probably seen these hummingbirds. People put their feeders in the gardens. But they're only tiny little things like this, very small. Some can do 200 flaps a second. Some fly 3,000 miles each way to their nesting site. So this little tiny bird takes on the weather, takes on the winds, and goes out to the islands to nest in a certain place. 3,000 miles they go to do that. They've got the least number of feathers of any bird. Their heart rate is 1,200 a minute. We're between 60 and 100. They are doing 12 times that with their heart rate. They lay the smallest bird eggs on the planet. They have to eat half their own weight in sugar daily. And their tongues, they can go in and out at 15 times a second. Again, I want you to try and imitate that just at the moment. So you can imagine, can't you, what an amazing creature this is. Now, here's some more facts about hummingbirds that are amazing. They breathe at a rate of 250 breaths a minute. So incredible aspiration going on. They are brave. A little hummingbird will take on a hawk and try and drive it away. The smallest variety is 2 inches long, so the whole thing's that long. Their wings rotate and they can fly upside down. They need to rest a bit every 15 minutes of feeding. They transfer 10 times the pollen that bees do. And their colours are achieved by iridescence in the layers of feathers, not by pigmentation. So you take off a feather from the hummingbird and you think, oh, it's a lovely blue feather, and it goes grey. You put it together on top of the other feathers that are there and you get all the colours coming through. So a totally different form of colour than you get in normal pigmentation. What an amazing creature little hummingbird is. Well, let's move on to ourselves, to the human body, the human brain. The human brain is made up of 100 billion neurons and nearly 100 trillion synapses. There's more than 300 times the connections in the brain than there are stars in the Milky Way galaxy. So our brains are incredibly complex and connected internally, which is something we find amazing. You get a brain and you look at it on the slab and it's just a lump of grey matter. But there's an energy in that brain which is incredible, and there are connections in our brain which are particularly amazing. Look what the human mind is capable of. Reasoning power and social awareness. Capable of abstract thought and worship. We're able to think and to worship another being. Creativity, expression, language, writing. We can create stories, we can write poems, we can do artwork, we can do mathematical calculations, imagination, planning. We can design things. All of these abilities are in the human mind and not found in most of the animals. We have a moral capacity to love, to worship, to apply divine qualities by choice. We can actually decide the sort of person we want to be. And we can overrule the animal instincts by rational thought. Yes, I know my body would like to do that, but I'm not going to do it because I love my God. So there's an awareness of morality and the ability to hope. These are the human characteristics that are in our brain that are not in most animals. Animals have tremendous instincts to feed, to breed and protect their young. But they don't have any of those. They have tremendous instincts in hunting powers and prowess. They don't have any of these. And we have a brain that God has designed to have all of these capabilities. And he's put man to have dominion over his universe. How do bones grow in the womb? From Ecclesiastes, we have this challenge made by God. You don't know what is the way of the Spirit. We don't know how God works in all his ways, or how the bones do grow in the womb of her that is with child. And God made that challenge 2,500 years ago. And we still don't know the exact process that bones can be created inside the womb of a woman. How those bones grow through life. What makes bones grow? You think about it. The bone is a hard substance, and yet they grow, they expand, they lengthen. God says, you don't know how that happens. And we still don't know particularly how that happens. Interesting, isn't it? The Creator knew all of this a long time ago. And then we come to the human eye. I'm not going to go into all the detail about the many, many parts of the human eye and the incredible lenses that we have, the nerves that connect to parts of the brain. There's about 1 million connections between the back of the eye and the brain that have to, all of them, match up exactly. It's like looking at a massive switchboard where there are thousands and thousands, millions of wires, and every two have to be connected to the right partner. Otherwise, you end up with problems. And we're born with that. And from a very tiny couple of human cells that get together to create a human being, this happens automatically as part of that development. And so a baby, when it's born, opens its eyes and it sees its parents because that system is working. And all of those parts are operating together, even down to the tear ducts and the eyelashes. All of them have a part to play and make that eye work. If you're an evolutionist, you have to say that every eye, and there are hundreds of different types of eyes in the creation. Animals and insects have very different eyes to us. All of them happen by pure chance, and they all got it exactly right to work perfectly without any chance of practice. People believe that. But Darwin didn't. Charles Darwin, the man who actually gave us the theory of evolution, said this, that the eye, with all its inimitable contrivances, could have been formed by natural selection seems, I freely confess, absurd in the highest degree. And when you get the founder of evolution saying that the eye is one of the greatest witnesses against evolution and casting doubt upon his own theory by that, you have to wonder why so many people want to believe in evolution. Let's come now to DNA, and I think this is something which is very interesting for us because it's only in the last 50 years we've really understood DNA, and we're still getting to understand it and to work out some of the last things about it we don't know. But we've unlocked what is called the life code, something that makes bodies work. And this is an incredibly complicated control structure that we have in every one of our bodies. DNA is short for that long word. I'm not going to try and pronounce it, but that's where we get it from this scientific word. And this is something we have in our bodies. And you see it's like a chain woven together. Inside a human cell, one human cell, so something you can't see unless you've got a microscope, there are 3 billion pieces of data. If you put those into books, it would be about 100,000 books. That's a lot of information. That's all inside one human cell. You take a 2 millimetre strand, and 2 millimetres, you can hardly see it, of DNA. It's got so much information. You put it onto CDs. It would create a stack of CDs 160,000 kilometres high, 2 millimetres of DNA. So we've got here an incredible life code that is making our bodies work. And it's called the remarkable chain of atoms and cells that create a regulated life. The Bible says in Psalm 139, we are fearfully and wonderfully made. And the Hebrew word for wonderfully made there is woven together. And look how this is woven together. And all of those colours indicate the different types of DNA cells that have to be in the right configuration to make everything work properly. And so DNA is an incredibly complex thing. We won't go into much more detail, but you can see another way to portray it here is these strands, where you have these binding things, and DNA can actually break itself into two and recreate itself in other ways. And it has a repair mechanism. So when something is not working properly in one part of the body, DNA can say, let's send out the tow truck and fix it up. And they do that. And the cells go out and they fix up the problem. So you've got a repair mechanism built into those DNA cells. And we won't go into the detail, but it's worth having a look at for yourself. Now, Richard Dawkins, who is the world's leading skeptic, was on BBC television debating with a man called John Lennox, who is a very good Christian debater. And they actually brought up DNA. And on the public BBC debate, when he was asked, can he believe that DNA just happened by pure chance? And he said this, well, no, I can't. Perhaps some space travellers planted the seeds of life and DNA upon the earth. Now, what an admission that is. We would say, of course, well, if you believe in spacemen, why not believe in a creator God who's got a great intelligence to actually make these things work from the very beginning, and angels to make it happen on the earth? But no, he's got to have spacemen because he just can't come to say, maybe there's a God. So creation provides circumstantial evidence for us to believe in God. The absolute perfection of the conditions necessary for life upon this earth. The brilliant and incredibly complex DNA that makes our bodies function properly. The intricate creation, the inbuilt instincts we've seen in the animals, all of them indicate creative intelligence and design. They just didn't happen by chance. The wisdom of complementary created things and all the programmed abilities that relate to each other. Just think about how much bees do for our livelihood. You know, without bees to actually fertilise all the fruit trees and plants, we would all starve. Of course, mankind messes it up by moving bees around, and we're getting all kinds of diseases affecting our bee populations, and we're putting our food at great risk. But God created the bees and the plants to work together. So what alternatives do we have? Looking at created things, as we've just briefly looked at for a few moments, what alternatives does a person have? Well, we would say God created by his miraculous power, in a way far beyond our comprehension, with a purpose that ultimately he would fill this earth with his glory. That's what we would conclude from the created things. Well, you go down the other path of Darwinian evolution, atheism. Everything came to be from nothing, by random chance, for no reason at all. There's no purpose in evolution, there's no outcome, there's no future promise in evolution. It just is a theory to explain anything but God. Let's think about the theory of evolution just for a moment. Proposed first by Charles Darwin. Theories of natural selection, that animals would actually choose to mate with certain animals, certain qualities, and there would be an evolution of species. And that theory was put forward on very limited evidence. It has a totally unbelievable, incalculable reliance upon blind chance recurring over and over and over and over. In every creature that's created, you'd need a tremendous amount of chance to make those creatures exist one by one. And then it suggests that life forms proceed upwards. You know, the evolution chart starts off with a snail walking on the bottom of the ocean. The snail gets legs and eventually gets out of the water, climbs a tree and then becomes a bird. And you have all these more complex creatures that they actually say happened over a long length of time. And that, of course, is how evolution explains everything. Well, if you give it enough billions of years, anything can happen. But this idea of growing upward in progress of different forms of life is completely unbelievable. So what are the basic theories of evolution? Well, from nothing for no reason, a big bang. So you ask the evolutionists what went bang. Well, we don't know what went bang. Something went bang because out of it hydrogen was formed. So you say, well, was it a hydrogen bomb or was it? They can't tell you. They don't know what the thing started from. Higher elements involved. So as all the elements of the Big Bang start to float around in space, you get other elements come into power, particularly hydrogen and oxygen. Then you get planets and stars. So some of these lumps of whatever the Big Bang blew up become into planets and stars and comets, and they begin to float around in space. And then you get a spontaneous generation of life. So you ask them, well, how did life start on this earth? Well, they say that a bolt of lightning came down and hit a little pond of water. Where did the water come from? Don't know. But anyway, hit a pond of water in which there were floating certain elements, and the lightning then made life generate. So you then get species that begin to change. As I said, you go from the snail and the tribolites, and you get the little animal that crawls out of the water and can suddenly breathe on land and climbs a tree, and it just goes on like that. And you get changes in a species. Now, changes within a species can happen. You can breed dogs to be a certain type of dog. You can breed horses to be good race horses. So you can actually have changes inside a species. That's microevolution. That is true. What you don't get is macroevolution. You cannot get totally new creatures being formed, totally different creatures being formed, different species. It just doesn't work. So you see, that's how they explain evolution. And of course, it is something which is very, very hard to believe. And even Darwin was shocked when his theories took off. I was a young man with uninformed ideas. I threw out queries, suggestions, wondering all the time over everything. And to my astonishment, the ideas took like wildfire. People made a religion of them. And that's certainly what the evolutionists do. They make a religion of believing in total blind chance because they don't want to face the consequences of believing in an intelligent creator. What has God got to say about the creation? He says this: "The wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of people who suppress the truth by their unrighteousness." Now, suppressing the truth about God is something that many, many scientists have done for a long, long time. Our textbooks that are put out into our schools treat evolution as an established, proven fact, when it's totally unscientific. There's no proof for it. It's just put out there as a fact. They suppress the truth by their unrighteousness. Because what can be known about God is plain to them. Anyone can see that there's intelligent design in the universe because God has made it plain to them. God has given them all the circumstantial evidence to say, look at that. There has to be a design and a mind behind that. For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen because they are understood through what has been made. And we can look at the creation and take so many moral lessons, so much conviction and so much faith that we can have because we can see that there's a creator out there and he's done it for a reason. And it goes on to say this: "For although they knew God, they did not glorify him as God or give him thanks, but they became futile in their thoughts and their senseless hearts were darkened. Although they claimed to be wise, they became fools." And that's what's happened with the majority of people in our world today. They have become fools in believing there is no God. And the Bible says that. The fool has said in his heart, there is no God. People are determined to deny that God the Creator exists. I want to put before you, as we come to a conclusion, 3 Bible statements. The Bible opens with the most glorious, challenging statement of any book you'll ever pick up. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. There's the challenge right from day one with the Bible. Hebrews 11 verse 6, "He that cometh to God must believe that he is." If you want to find God, you must first believe that he exists, that he is that great creator, and that he rewards those that diligently seek him. And Romans 10 verse 17, faith. Faith is the power for us to believe. Faith is the confidence that we believe every word that God says. It comes by hearing. Not just reading, it comes by hearing what God has been saying. And as we read these challenges in Job 38, have you seen this? Have you seen that? Can you explain this? We get a conviction that there is a God. And we choose to believe. We choose to believe because we hear the word of God. And you need a lot more faith to accept evolution than to believe in a creator. So let's make a choice. Where are we going to put our confidence? Where is our faith going to be? Well, Paul says this, that your faith should not stand in the wisdom of men, but in the power of God. Let's come to the Bible. Let's read what God has to say about himself. Let's learn from the creation the attributes of that glorious creator. And let's follow the Maker's instructions.
Don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Drop a comment in the comment section and let us know what you thought. And make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload. Please share it and spread the word. Thanks for watching. And remember to come back soon.